Good afternoon. This is our first public event for the year. It's a good start. We actually came across this, well, it was actually through the introduction of Nick Deocampo. He introduced us to Ashley, and she offered to do this public program for us. So just to introduce the session, Pangarap ng Arkibo, the filmed worlding of Nicolas Viernes, 1902 to 1991. The presentation is organized, the research actually is based on the research of Ashley Dequila, an artist, filmmaker, and archivist of Negrense and Tagalog descent, and Ilonggo descent. She holds an MFA in Moving Image and is completing her MA in Art History from the School of Art and Art History at the University of Illinois, Chicago. She's co-curator, partner, and researcher of the Philippine Heritage Collection at the Field Museum of Natural History. Ashley is a de facto archivist and collection manager of the Filipino American Historical Society of Chicago, securing the National Film Preservation Foundation Award in 2024 and 2025 for the 16mm home movies by Nicolas Viernes, the earliest surviving Filipino migrant documentary in American cinema history. After her presentation, she will be holding a conversation with, you all know him, Professor Nick Deocampo, distinguished Filipino filmmaker, film historian, and film literacy advocate. He had just retired, no? But happily retired, but busier than ever. For more than 30 years, he has created a vast array of acclaimed films and video documentaries, capturing topics such as life under military dictatorship, film history, and the environment. In 1992, Nick was named one of the 10 outstanding young men in the Philippines, and in 1993 was recognized in Japan as one of the 10 outstanding young persons of the world. Wow, of the world. No, the fact that it's of the world, hindi lang Philippines. His outstanding contributions to cinema earned him a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Filipino Academy of Movie Arts and Sciences Awards, or the FAHSC, as well as the Lamberto Abellana Award from the Film Academy of the Philippines. It's not listed here, but he also received the Casa Asia Award for film, for culture and the arts in 2023. So we'll start with a presentation of Ashley, and then conversation with Nick, and then an open forum. And we're happy that we have a full house. Usually we get like 80 registrants and probably 30 actual warm bodies. So I'm glad that we have real warm bodies here. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ms. Boots. Hi everyone, my name is Ashley Dequila. I am, as Boots said, the de facto archivist and collection manager of the Filipino American Historical Society of Chicago. I'm super honored to be here with you all today and to share the journey just of what all of this has entailed to make it here, and to just be in collaboration with Nick Deocampo, who I consider a mentor and a dear friend. So this presentation is called Pangarap ng Arkibo. It is the dream of the archive, and I really want to start by saying that this is beyond the wildest dreams of the filmmaker and the founder of the Historical Society, Estrella Alamar. The Filipino American Historical Society of Chicago was established in 1986 in the Hyde Park neighborhood of the south side of Chicago by Estrella Ravello Alamar. Her parents were from Solano, Nueva Vizcaya, and they migrated here in the 1920s and 1930s. She was born in 1936 on the west side of Chicago in tenement housing. and established the Historical Society in 1986 and passed away in 2022. I actually was supposed to meet her the weekend that she fell critically ill and went on life support. So because of this really narrow window, I felt really compelled to do something about this really incredible legacy that she had left behind. In 2001, she penned this book here on the right called Filipinos in Chicago. It's a pictorial essay book from Arcadia Publishing, and it was the very first of its kind. Australia was really a vanguard of archiving its our community history, and following this version of the book, there were multiple iterations that followed. Filipinos in Stockton, Filipinos in East Bay, Filipinos in New York, etc. So she was really ahead of the curve and became even the vice president of the Filipino American National Historical Society, if any of you are familiar with that organization as well. In 1950, her parents purchased their home on 5472 South Dorchester Avenue in Hyde Park, and it's actually a historic site in its own merit in that it was the first home owned by Filipino people in Chicago, in the city of Chicago. There were barriers, socioeconomic barriers to owning property at the time, so that alone makes it, highly significant. This is an image of Australia on the left side. She's the tallest one. She was the oldest of 4 sisters. Those are her sisters, Gloria, Flora, and Pearl. And those are her parents, Ambrosia and Florentino. On the right, that's an image of them from Chicago Daily News. It's a newspaper clipping from 1939, and it says, "Fun they wouldn't have in the homeland." And that's Australia and her sister Flora playing in the snow. Because, as you all know, there's no snow here in the Philippines, so it was just a really novel highlight. After she passed away, it was a really huge undertaking to clear her house of ephemera. There were over 400 boxes of really incredible archival material that were at her house. She was honestly a bit of a hoarder. So think photographs, cultural artifacts, newsletters, documents, books, records, film, lots of different AV media, Super 8 film, VHS tapes, reel-to-reel audio, Shirley Temple dolls, Mickey Mouse, lots of different Mickey Mouse things, even Elvis, everything you can think of, it was all packed into that house. And a team of really dedicated volunteers and I were there every weekend to sort things out because we really understood the value of this collection. It was really at risk, and we had to act fast. The image on the right, that's a commissioned painting by Willie Buhay. He was an artist and actually worked with the Cultural Center of the Philippines and with Imelda Marcos too. He was her floral designer, and he was the artistic director of the Filipino American Historical Society of Chicago. He actually passed away this year in June, but that's his commemoration painting. During this time, I became the de facto collection manager and archivist. I partnered with multiple institutions across the city to just save as much of the material as possible. First, it was with the University of Illinois Chicago's Daily Library Special Collections and Archives. We moved all of our fragile paper documents and photographs there. We're still partnered with them. And then we also partnered with the University of Chicago's Southside Home Movie Project. That was founded by Jacqueline Stewart in 2000, and it basically preserves all of the film and analog media of Southside residents. So it's primarily a Black African-American collection, but they welcomed us, and that's where we were able to make our first scans of the films, and that just moved us along a lot. In 2000, Australia had also founded the museum, the Filipino American Historical Society of Chicago Museum in the Lakeview neighborhood, and that's Willie Buhay with her. That's Mumu the cow that he painted on the right. That's just our storefront. Unfortunately, the museum was only open for 3 years because she was a one-woman show. She had never written a grant before, and it was a really different time. There was no social media. So she did not have the support and outreach that she could have garnered today. So it was her dying wish and her dream that the museum would reopen again. As it says here in their mission statement at the bottom, it says the museum will reopen again. And last year, or 2 years ago now, I guess, in October 2024, we were able to reopen her museum after 23 years of closure. This is our space now at Mata Contemporary. It's an artist warehouse space in the Pilsen neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. And that's me with a team of volunteers, and that's my daughter who's sitting in the back right here. But that is a 10-foot by 15-foot photo transfer mural that I directed in the background. And that's one of our original archival images. It is the inaugural dance of the Philippine Women's Club in 1937. And right now it's on view at the Harold Washington Public Library in Chicago for a Filipino American History Month exhibit that's closing in February. So we're all here today because of her film collection, primarily because of her uncle Nicholas Galutera Viernes. He was a cousin of her mother, Ambrosia Galutera Ravello. And during this process, I remember it really vividly. In March, we had just found boxes of film reels. And we didn't know what to do with them, so I brought them all to my studio. At the time, I was in an MFA program at University of Illinois, Chicago, and I thought I would just telecine all of them, and it'd be totally fine, no problem. Thankfully, that did not happen. I had no idea how to handle film. I would have definitely damaged the film. There was another volunteer present from the Chicago Film Society who had worked with Australia at the time in 2019 for a Chicago area archivist assessment. So we triaged all of the material to Chicago Film Society, and I think that day alone we had found maybe 120 films. More films began to emerge. So this is a biography from Jenny.com of Nicholas Galutera Viernes, and I'll just read it out loud verbatim because I think this is how his family wanted him to be remembered, and I just wanted to honor this statement. It says, Nicholas was the second child of 9. He was also the first Viernes who traveled by ship to the United States in 1926. He was an excellent historian through his movie camera expertise and hobby. He documented much of his travels, family celebrations, and activities throughout his life on film. He started work as a migrant farmer throughout the US. Finally established residence in Chicago, worked for General Motors Company as a pipe fitter in the making of locomotive engines for 25 years. He was considered the unofficial Chicago community Filipino film historian / cameraman. He has captured many events since his arrival in 1926. He also enjoyed fishing with his friends and traveled to many places nationally. Though he lived his life in the U.S., he never took the oath to become a citizen. He was very generous, caring, and helpful to the mass of people he encountered throughout his life. He was a great brother, uncle, granduncle, and friend. He never married, but was loved by all. And that is a picture of him on the left. That is also from the Jenny site, and that's him with his Bell & Howell camera. So just in reviewing this, it said that he began to make films in 1926. I wanted to point to the consumer history of 16mm film at the time. 16mm film had been available for 3 years at this point. By the time he moved to the US and had picked up a film camera, there's nothing known about his training or how he became so prolific in his filmmaking endeavors. But I just wanted to point to this seal from Kodak Motion Pictures, celebrating 100 years of film from 1923 to 2023. They actually had a centennial conference at University of Indiana in Bloomington in 2023 that Southside Home Movie Project was a part of, too. That reel on the right is the earliest reel in our collection. It's from 1930. I looked closer, I checked it. It's from 1930. As you all can see, it's not shaped like a circle on the inside. It's kind of a hexagon, and it's really curled. That is just significant decay and damage. It's really warped. A healthy film reel is just perfectly circular. There's no texture like that, but actually we're able to restore this film still, but it will cost $10,000. So that's what makes, these presentations really meaningful, in that I can share the call for action and need for assistance in this endeavor, because this is only one of maybe over a dozen films in this condition that can still be chemically restored and replasticized, and we can still save the image in itself, but it's still not a guarantee. So yeah, we'll get back to this later. Please feel free to see me afterwards if anyone's interested in helping me appeal to some fundraising. His legacy, he left behind over 300 16mm films within his lifetime, depicting early and mid-century Filipino American life in Chicago and beyond. A lot of that is alluded to in his biography, where it says that he captured his family and friends and travels. He was also very much into sporting events. He enjoyed boxing, ice skating, horse racing, baseball especially. One of the films that we're going to screen today depicts Migrant Baseball League. And all of that was really saved because of his loving and caring foresight to preserve history as it was. What makes these films even more significant is that over a dozen of them were made prior to World War II. They're all predating 1941. The ones that we're going to screen today are the 2024 National Film Preservation Foundation Award winners, and they're all pre-World War II films. This is Nick's bread and butter right here, but as many of you know, out of 400 to 600 films, feature films made in the Philippines prior to World War II, only 6 are extant today, only 6 are surviving. Nick found the 6th one just a few months ago in Belgium, I believe, Diwata. So the cinematic memory that Nicholas Viernes brings to us all, to the world, is restored through the active stewardship and preservation of these films. So 10 titles total, 2024 and 2025. Out of those 10 titles, 9 of them are pre-World War II. There is one called Victory Over Japan Day, and that is the celebration post-World War II in downtown Chicago. But we're not going to screen that one today. So this is just some images of the archiving efforts as they were triaged by Chicago Film Society and then digitized through Southside Home Movie Project. The image on the left is my documentary class who had visited the collection at Chicago Film Society, and we all categorized them chronologically by decade, and then I asked everyone to sniff each can to check for vinegar syndrome. Because that's not something I wanted to do with each can. So it's really important to just steward this as a community, as we need all hands on deck. The image in the center, that was my inspection station at Southside Home Movie Project. It was a 41-step process from start to finish, extremely tedious. So each workday I would probably do 1 to 2 films, honestly. It was part-time work, but it was just so entailed, so involved. And then the image on the right is Aya, who's back there playing with a $40,000 Film Fabrique scanner. It's still intact. I wanted to also talk about some of the programming that we've done to activate this collection and to just continue leaning on the community to move things along. This was the community archiving workshop that we did with Society for American Archivists in 2024 at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Community Archiving Workshop is a Mellon Fund initiative of the Association of Moving Image Archivists. And we had different AV experts from all across the country, from Library of Congress, Smithsonian, Video Data Bank, and more, come and do demos and presentations on how to identify and inventory assets. So about 50 volunteers came this day, and by the end of the day, we had inventoried, I believe, 306 assets throughout a full work day. So that's just the beginning of our catalog. This is going to need to be a series, and each workshop costs $5,000 to $10,000 to execute, but Community Archiving Workshop is interested in coming here to the Philippines in the future and continuing to do this type of work as well. We have also done this program called OPM plus Home Movies. We launched this at UP Film Institute last year in January. We most recently did it at the San Diego Asian Film Festival. This is my really dear friend, Les the DJ, Les Tulusan. They are only vinyl records, and they do OPM. They're based in Washington, D.C., and also DJ with Smithsonian, and the films are paired with the music to just kind of activate and enhance the experience of them. And then we have this upcoming program coming up called The Art of Belonging, a trilogy of short plays and films in which the short plays by Larry Leopoldo, a member of Circa Pintig, a theater organization, are based off of the literary gems of Bienvenido Santos, who's considered the premier Asian American and Filipino American literary artist in the United States. And in the backdrop of all of the plays, we're going to have the films projected as well, because they pair really nicely. So we're going to screen the films pretty soon, but I wanted to anchor just our understanding of the sociocultural landscape of the 1930s. In these films, what'll be really striking is that you'll see interracial families prominently featured, and at the time it was still really incredibly taboo. Miscegenation in the Midwest was not illegal, but it was made illegal in California following the Watsonville riots of 1930, in which Filipino farm workers were terrorized by white mobs because they were upset that Filipino men and white women were together dancing at the dance halls. So that actually prompted Congress to enact the Tidings-McDuffie Act a few years later in 1934, in which only 50 Filipinos were allowed to immigrate to the United States. Obviously, there were many more Filipinos that got around that and did not come, within that quota. But remarkably, the mother of Estrella, Ambrosia Galutera, she was number 37 of the 50 when she immigrated here. She had really narrowly missed that window. And that's just something that's shared a lot in the lore of the history of the organization. So just to frame how I would like for you all to experience these films, the filmed worlding of Uncle Nick. Worlding is the active presence of making or becoming a world. And it is during the screening and presentation to your participation and just your experience of it is also continuing to build that world. Like I said at the very beginning, he would have never dreamed, that we would be presenting to you all here today at Ateneo. He honestly had to force his nieces to watch these projections of these films in his basement. So just the trajectory is really incredible. We're going to screen the film still that's featured here, Little Farmers of Reynoldsburg, at the 26th Annual International Film Preservation Festival at the Museum of Modern Art in New York at the end of this month. So that too is just something else that we're witnessing in this journey. I think we can play. So during the screening, I'm going to just read some text that I wrote about each film. And Nick, would you like to talk with me during this part, or did you want to wait until afterward? Okay. That's him on top. So really remarkably, we were able to connect with the living descendants of this family. I found Katie Acebo Cosgrove on Facebook. These are her grandparents that were featured earlier. This is Nick, by the way, this right here. He's always dressed to the nines, always really dapper in his films. And what we wonder is who was holding the camera? Who's holding the camera? Who's behind the camera? Who did he instruct or train to operate? Because it's done quite well. And it's handheld. And there are moments in his other films where you can tell the person did not know how to operate a camera. It's shaking. And that's possibly because it's on a boat too, when we've noticed that. But maybe he was using a tripod? No? You think it's all handheld?
When he moves, the camera moves too.
So one of the terms of the National Film Preservation Foundation grant is that we receive full preservation, in which all of the 5 films in that cycle are going to have 16mm prints made, or they did have 16mm prints made of them as well. So that's what's going to screen at the MoMA, and hopefully in the future we can bring 60mm prints here to the Philippines. Just because the experience of 60mm is so much more vital and so much more rich to be present with. But these images are really important, I believe, to the heritage of just American and global diasporic memory. These images were not meant to be recovered, and they change everything completely. This is the next film. This is Chicago All-Stars. This film highlights an interstate migrant Filipino baseball league tournament with teams representing Chicago, Detroit, and Washington, D.C. The Field Museum of Natural History is visible from shots of Grant Park, prior to the construction of DuSable Lakeshore Drive. Read alongside 13,000 artifacts of the Philippine Heritage Collection at the adjacent Field Museum, the films become a palimpsest that critique the simultaneity of colonial extraction and everyday joy. Baseball was introduced in the Philippines after its annexation by the US as a means of assimilation and to subdue the prevalence of cockfighting, a popular form of entertainment. Dean C. Worcester, the Secretary of Interior Colonial Affairs for the US from 1901 to 1904, captured over 15,000 photographs and 2 miles of film reel of native Filipino people, and realized the photography's ability to sway public agenda and affirm the US colonial opinion. With reprehensible and racist intentions, he photographed and filmed natives playing baseball in their traditional clothing, but wearing baseball caps in front of an audience of spectators. This footage that we see here both inherits and disrupts that visual regime. Filipino visuality has been shaped by colonial misrepresentation in archives and imperial museum displays, where Filipinos were often reduced to stereotypes and images of objection. Nicholas Viernes' home movies, in contrast, offer autonomous portrayals of Filipino American life that reject these dehumanizing depictions. The families that are showcased in this film, Chicago All-Stars especially, alongside many others shot by Viernes, also defy the logic and taboo of miscegenation, as they are bold moments of joy and prosperity within a rapidly diversifying social landscape. the founder of the Historical Society noted that most of these white women were Eastern European, and they were actually ostracized and disowned by their families for intermarrying with Filipino men at the time. Like I mentioned earlier, it wasn't illegal in the Midwest specifically, as it was in the West Coast, but it was still the 1930s. And even today, there's still a taboo, there's still a charge with interracial marriage. But at this time, it was considered really radical. But the first generation of Filipino children, Filipino American children born in the US, were biracial. Mostly Filipino men with their white wives, as the first wave of immigrants who came to the US were male laborers. They're Filipino men, laborers, and pensionados. These are the two little girls that we just saw earlier. This is color reel. This is now 1939, but the first reel that we watched, Little Farmers of Reynoldsburg, also had color at the end of it. Color film at this time was still a new technology. The first film, 1936, Little Farmers, there's definitely some degradation of the coloring, but here it's a lot more clean, it's a lot more crisp. And this is all Kodachrome, which is no longer in stock. So another part of this project also entails reaching out to the descendants. Like I mentioned earlier, we were able to locate the granddaughter of the Acebo family, but I haven't been able to locate Mr. Benny Rodak's family. Those are his twin daughters. I've seen them in other photographs in our archive. We have huge banquet photos where the entire community is present at like a hotel banquet for Rizal Day. And there's one where they're both sitting at the front. They're probably 12 or 13 years old. And it's kind of creepy because they're perfectly symmetrical twins. It's like The Shining, exactly. It's exactly like that. But I haven't been able to find information on them or their descendants yet. But that's also just a part of this work too. And that's also what kind of gets into questions around ethics. That's something we have to just constantly approach while we're doing this work and in working with home movies. That like we did not necessarily ask them, if they would like to have these memories shared because they're deceased too. How do their family members feel about that? But when I spoke with the granddaughter of the Acebo family, she was really happy that we were doing this work, and just was really amazed that her grandparents are so recognized. They're going to be at the MoMA, so she's actually coming to the MoMA too. Waving.
So eerie.
Yeah. They're like ghosts.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is Reynoldsburg Part 2. This was filmed a year after the first one, Reynoldsburg, The Little Farmers of Reynoldsburg. This film was recovered a year later in 2024 from an unlabeled box containing 66 more films that had not been discovered and were not initially recovered from the house in 2023. They were in the storage unit. And it was like Christmas when we found them. This is the sequel to Little Farmers and captures additional scenes of community gathering at the Acebo family farm. and now including footage of the Alayu family, whose archive is housed at the Illinois History and Lincoln Collections. The film's closing images, which you will see in later moments, are really potent. We'll see the Acebos and their companions driving off in their automobiles into the horizons as a striking visual departure from Little Farmers, which had opened with the family posed before their barn, with little Margie perched atop a horse. The contrast between the still horse and moving car evokes a symbolic tension between tradition and mobility, rootedness and futurity. The automobile that you'll see here does not simply represent modernity or technological development, but is also a cinematic metaphor for the unfolding American dream, one that gestures towards economic mobility and diasporic belonging on new terms. So we actually, Rebecca from Chicago Film Society, who I projected these films with, we think that Margie here is pregnant at this time because little Margie had a younger brother, and because you can kind of see her bump. There's Nick in the striped shirt. No scratches? Yeah. So Nick is commenting on the quality of the film, and it's really remarkable that all of these stayed in such good condition. And a reason for that is because Chicago is super cold. I don't know if you all know, but they were all in the basement and garage of her home, which in itself becomes a film vault because of the cooler temperatures. But there was actually 2 floods in her home. Her garage flooded, and who knows what films were lost during that. So there could have been so many more films too. This is the color end of the reel. This is still 1937. So like I mentioned, with the first one, Little Farmers, color film technology was still new, which is why there's just a bit of a tint to this. It's not, yeah, it's a bit magenta. Those are cornfields of the Midwest.
The camera movement is so no tripod. But no, it's not even it's a matter that it's not a very unusual time.
Do you know if they had light meters at this time?
That's another thing. During the time, yes.
They would have had to have a light meter.
It seems your intention that the stock tools will reappear with that. That's your intention.
That's the overscan for this
It's
film.
over. So
Some of
that's
them.
gonna be propped, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to show the filminess of it.
So if we were to read political economy here, they were farming their own land.
Yeah, their own land,
So they're not working for anyone else but
themselves, which is just a major departure of
no,
what
big
we
departure,
envisioned.
big departure.
Yeah. I'm also thinking about just sugarcane plantation workers here in the Philippines, and we never see those stories. They didn't have the ability to record those memories, but how do
Only
we
because you said the wife, it's the wife who
own the farm?
owns.
Very likely.
And if this wife is East European, that thickens the plot.
Or American. Or American.
Yeah, so where did the East European you said? So she's not.
We don't know for
We don't
sure.
know.
I didn't
Room for research.
yeah, room for research.
Siya si taas, no?
That is him on the top. That's him standing with little Margie. He was a very small man. He was probably 5'4", 4'12", or 4'11" to 5'2". Very short. And there's actually a story of him. He lived in the South Side and was robbed. His house was robbed a few times. And one of the times he got thrown out of his own window because he was so small. So after that, he moved in with his brother near the airport. Who's holding the camera?
There should be a clue somewhere. None in his writings. No.
No, we haven't.
But maybe here somewhere we might.
It might have been one of the other people.
You didn't edit this, right?
Oh,
It's
absolutely not.
already raw.
Well, it's clipped for the
Yes.
presentation, but no.
Ah.
Yeah.
Where is it? There might be.
It would have had to be a companion that
Right.
consistently traveled with him.
But he could have appeared.
He could have
Definitely we're seeing him in some of this. This I think.
So this is Calumet Park. This scene right here is from 1939. This again is in Kodachrome. This is a composite reel compiled by Viernes for over more than a decade. It opens with footage from 1939, a community outing featuring the Cagayan Valley Association. It's a migrant interest group, regional interest group. And among them, there's Estrella Alamar as a toddler. That's her with the white cap, the little bonnet. And that is her mother in the pink dress. That's Ambrosia. And that's Estrella's younger sister, Flora, the smaller one. As you can see, one of the guys is wearing a baseball team uniform. I'm just for the first time noticing the wind.
Mm.
When we screen these films and share them with audiences, a lot of people feel, a lot of Filipinos especially, they feel a sense of familiarity with them, even though these are not their relatives. You know, these are still very familiar pictures because they look like us, because they could stand in place for the memories that our family members would have had too, that did not exist then. And especially those in the United States, but I think it's universal. This right here is really interesting. This is an all-white beach in Calumet Park, and here's Nicholas Viernes filming it in the back without any issue. I mean, you guys might have noticed that guy looking at him like a funny look, but it was really a liminal space that he occupied in between the hard racial lines defining Jim Crow's America at the time. It was really black or white. It was white or colored. And here he is at this all-white beach, you know, not getting beat up, not getting arrested or harassed, and filming. He had his camera. He's a small, peculiar brown man with his film camera, probably dressed really well at this beach.
And I can do a gay reading here.
Here we go.
I love it. This is classic. Oh, baby, get that from me. Oh, dear. Early representation. Yes. And there's a guy behind.
So that's the queer coding
Yes.
of the film, the queer
Hallelujah.
gaze.
Good thing. Good Uncle.
And this is Pearl. This is Australia's third youngest sister. She's still alive. She's actually the only sister amongst all of them that is still alive. The other three have passed away. I've been in touch with her, but she's pretty old. She's in her late 80s. She has seen this footage. I haven't been able to like meet her in person, but I've talked to her on the phone. She's really warm. She's really sweet, but it's just hard to meet in person. The interracial.
Yeah.
And this is Australia on the swing on the right. She would have been 4 years old at this time. And there's like a man, a grown man swinging really aggressively behind there. Yeah, maybe that's what Nick was filming instead.
Now there are clues as to
Yeah.
Nick's reference.
Yeah. National Film Preservation Foundation, they really liked that shot of Australia. That was, when they announced the news, this is the shot that they featured up close of her. So the slight blur, I think, is because of the distance measurement. Maybe the movement too.
Because the lady at the back is
In focus.
So
Yeah.
it's the swing. The movement of the swing. Everybody's in focus. So that's good. But you're right, because they're in the foreground, maybe the focus was
There's a lot of moments like this throughout his films. He focuses on flowers and on nature too, just really intimate glimpses, I think, of his artistic sensibility. But he was described as a very silent man. He was potentially nonverbal because of that description. I heard that from his niece, who's still alive today. But I really think that film was his language. This is how he communicated. This is how he brought his world to ours. And just really grateful. So this film was reviewed by Dr. Andy Remokilio. She is a professor of Asian American history at Harvard University and wrote her dissertation on the oral history of Estrella Alamar, the founder of the Historical Society. And what she notes about this scene in particular is that you can really get a grasp of their upward mobility just because of the clothes that they're wearing. And this has got to be in Hyde Park as well. This area still looks like this. They really preserved a lot of the neighborhood. She's wearing fur. It's a fur lining. Those are the 4 girls now, Australia and her 3 sisters. And I think they're just showing off the car and just posing. That is Tippy the cat. It was a rescue cat, and there's actually a painting of Tippy that we recovered in the house and that we gave to Pearl, the sister who's still alive today. There's Uncle Nick with Tippy. Who's holding the camera now?
Because you see, the thing here is we're attributing all of this to Nick, to Uncle Nick, but somebody else, there's an avatar here, there's somebody else who needs to be identified, who needs to be acknowledged.
This is like an unsighted cinematographer.
Absolutely. Who is that?
Each
Suddenly, Nick becomes a subject, and therefore there is still somebody who needs to be identified, recognized. There you go. Are there more?
This is the last one. This is called Chicago of Today, and it's kind of the outlier of the collection. This is a sweeping visual love letter to 1930s Chicago, featuring panoramic views from atop the Tribune Tower, close-ups of landmark buildings, and documentary footage of the University of Chicago, Lincoln Park, and Back of the Yards neighborhood. It provides a rare architectural record of urban space during the Depression. And what I want to know is how he was able to get on top of these roofs. Who did he know? Who was his connection?
Did he work for any newspaper?
He worked for General Motors, locomotives. Yeah, he was a union pipe fitter. But he probably knew someone in construction, someone in the labor force who gave him access. And that's Navy Pier right there. This is pre-World War II. So Navy Pier was where the Navy was stationed That's really interesting to know. There's Helena Rubinstein. You see that sign? So I remember when we first screened this at UP Film Institute in 2023, Nick, you really remarked on the cinematic eye that Uncle Nick just is demonstrating here. Like,
parallel to the city symphonies, not much editing here, not at all maybe, but during this time, the city symphonies, it was very popular. I mean, images of cities, Richter, Egeling, and all of this, mainly German aesthetics. Yeah.
so this is now Lincoln Park. This is the Lincoln Park Zoo. The skinny tiger. That's his brother, Albert Viernes, on the right.
Who knows it must be his brother? It's all the camera.
It could be. His brother was a world-renowned yo-yo champion. We have films of his brother, like in his prime, with two yo-yos.
There you go.
Upside
That
down.
there.
Yeah, so it could have been his brother.
There you go. That's the
That's a
mystery
good
we need
theory.
to uncover. But that's a clue. Only one brother?
No, he was one of several.
Oh, 9.
Yeah, nine.
There you go.
But him and that brother Albert were really close. He lived with him
Okay.
for the rest of his life.
Therefore, lived with him.
He lived with
there.
him, yeah.
Okay.
So that concludes our
Oh.
screening. Thank you all so much.
We're also lucky. You just don't know how lucky we are. We're watching, and this is so historic. I mean, we're watching some of the earliest films made by a Filipino. And this claim, of course, is backed up by the whole idea. Hi, Dr. Recipients. It's so good to see you. By the fact that Nicholas Viernes did not surrender his passport. He did not had aspirations of becoming a U.S. citizen. So I guess the first question we may have is, what's the Filipino claim here? So we can rest it with that kind of an argument that he remained to be a Filipino but living in America. But I think the experience that we have today, I would like to talk about 3 ways that this is significant. And I will frame this, although there's more we can talk about, on the following issues. One, the narrative of the Filipino American. A lot of things have already been discussed by Ashley. How does this compare to the one that we know so extensively, the Carlos Bulosan framework? We only know that during the 30s, all Filipinos, the migrant Filipinos were suffering, were victims. There's always Filipinos versus American. So that's intense. And that is how, I guess, the history of the Filipinos in America has really been framed. Now here comes Nicholas Viernes. What do we make out of it? Does it change a lot of things? Not necessarily, but there's a new paradigm I think that we can talk about. Suddenly there's a contrast that is being demanded of us. First of all, the medium. Bulosan used printed word. The power of the printed word. and how he was able to frame it, interestingly, autobiographically. You remember? Much of what he has written in Americans in the Heart is that it was mainly his personal experience. Against, we need to see this against now, this newly recovered, newly found presentation or materials that has been recorded in motion pictures. And this is also based on autobiography because mainly we are watching a home movie. And you can really hear both of them, while writing, while handling the camera, the pulse of the creator is always there. So how lucky we are to see a home movie and not a manufactured, fictionalized account, because we really see a big contrast now between a Bulosan, and I'm not going to say versus a Viernes, but I'm sure down the line that is going to make for future scholars, future students of Filipino American history, this will be unavoidable. A new argument has just been added. You just don't know the impact that this discovery of these 30s films, you just don't know how it will impact the discourse down the road. This is now waiting for new scholars. And I bet somebody here is going to break away one day. I really believe in that. Somebody's already smiling. I can see some sparks in some eyes. Somebody is nodding at the back. I'm reading all your body languages. And I'm sure you are going to take this as a challenge. I don't know who you are, whether you come from UP, Ateneo, or God knows where, but I bet somebody here, either in a postgraduate situation, or you may already be a scholar or a writer, or you're even a guest in this country, there will be a breakaway discourse that will happen. And this is going to be very rich. Don't wait for me to write my book. And I think Ashley and I will be writing our book. But this is huge. This is huge in terms of, one, the narrative of the Filipino American. And as I said, I can already outline some things that we need to talk about. One, the media that were used. Motion pictures versus printed word. The contrast between the expression of autobiography. We're just so happy now that this has not been fictionalized, but a big fiction can be created out of this for somebody who's really creative. What else have I written here? The media, as I said, the contrast between the Bulosan paradigm of the Filipino American and now this we have not really talked about, but you've seen it. How did Viernes bring out the Filipino American narrative? How are we now going to reconcile ourselves with all the issues that have been raised and have been canonized and institutionalized in terms of the discrimination and all that? How are we now going to look at it through the lens, I mean literally, through the lens of Viernes? But still, somebody else can really twist it that, no, there's something hidden here. That was why, all the while I was looking at, so what's the political economy? What kind of a political economy reading will I find in this man working on a field that I find out now that it's owned by the wife, and now it's a common property, and now where there's a capital there, but the profit now does not go to a landlord, but to this domesticated family, which is the basis for capitalism. And so they can buy a car. And so she can give his wife with a fur coat. And so the girls, the twins, they're all in their Sunday best. They spend their Sundays in the park. They never show us except in the early black and white, they showed us how they farmed their field, but later on we only see the privileged life. How are we now going to look at it? If we will still insist in looking for political economy, it's there, but we're left only with the icing in the cake. And so we need to dig some more. What were the realities of a Filipino American life at the time in terms of economic support, in terms of later on it will have to go into, so what ideology are we now going to frame? Because the ideology in the Bolosan is clear, and as I said, it's been canonized and institutionalized. Racial discrimination, etc. But here, they're so privileged. So is this about assimilation? Is this about acceptance, belonging? For example, that was a very important issue of shooting on a beach. How can you occupy a space, no matter how marginal? We know exactly that he was in a receiving space, looking at the vast expanse of the sea, with all these people shooting. But you see, until we establish that it was really Nicolas Viernes shooting, and not maybe an American friend, I mean, at this point, those are the issues. These are the dilemmas, no, of filmmaking. You still need to identify the fingerprint. You know, who was really holding the camera? What kind of technology was really used? So, unlike it, well, literature too has a lot of devices you need to unpack and uncover. That's why we go into all these discussions of the literary devices, the metaphors, all right, all those literary elements that we need to talk about. We in cinema, you need to be equipped as well in terms of identifying who was doing what kind of technology was used, why did he move that camera that way, and to what effect did that movement work? What is the ideology of that gaze? As you said, you know, there's an element of reception which is different in terms of reading literature and reading a film. For example, me, among all the many, but I'm glad many chuckled and laughed, I was doing a gay reading. Immediately when I saw the two men rubbing, you know, I mean, please, that is unmistakable for me. That is just so iconic. I can react to it, but all of you, I'm sure, if that scene passed by, it would not have mattered. But I could, the image was screaming at me, this is a gay gesture! I mean, can you blame me for that? You cannot even rob me of my response. I am a creator of that meaning. I shared it with you by screaming it out, and I intended it, I'm going to scream it out loud. That, hey, I'm doing a gay reading here. Whether you agree with me or not, but, you know, that's the text of that image. That's the semiotics of that gesture. All right, so we are just in issue number 1. Issue number 2 is the history of the documentary. And here I need to stand because I need to be more emphatic with this. The history of the documentary. What was the documentary at this time? The documentary was not yet invented. In the 1930s, and remember, the first image was 1920, or the first film was made around 1926. John Grierson, who coined the word documentary, has not yet popularized the documentary. The word that he used to describe Robert Flaherty, considered the father of documentary, an American, but John Grierson was British. This was not yet a popular term. But there was a practitioner. I mean, this kind of filmmaking was already happening. But here again, why, you know, you can just write a book, one about that Filipino American narrative that I was talking about. The second book that can possibly be written, and I'm very excited about this, is, you know, how does the Viernes documentary figure in the history of the documentary, not just the Philippine documentary, because immediately it is certifiable. He is a pioneer of Philippine documentary. Again, based on the fact that I said he did not give up his Filipino passport. We can still claim exactly that, look, you know, here's a Filipino who happened to be in America. It was his context. But Filipinos are everywhere right now. Are you going to deny them of their identity just because they're in Sweden? Or somebody is in Portugal right now, all right, hiding. So has he given up? He has given up his passport. It was cut off. But we're still running after him. Right? I mean, and he needs to be produced. Oo nga. Hindi. Ay, na-press mo nga. Oo. I'm so excited. There's just so much to talk about, Ashley. Once again, thank you really so much for this gift. I'm just in number 2. And number 2 can be an entire afternoon. So as a documentary filmmaker myself, conscious of the medium that I work in, its history, its aesthetics, its technique, its ideology, the film of Viernes opens itself up to a lot of possible issues we can discuss. In fact, we can really start with a question, is this exactly a documentary? I would say these are documents, they're not yet a documentary. But where do documentaries come from? Documents. So he is primal. The role of Viernes is primal, foundational, seminal, original. I'm looking for another beautiful word, which just escapes me right now. Oh dear God, I can't think of it. Somebody who really starts something. All right, so anyway, to a certain point, if I may express a regret, that Viernes did not move it one step further, and if he did, in other words, he turned his documents into documentary, believe me, he will be in the level of the world pioneers. I'm not saying that he's not. Right now, he's still in the level of the pioneers like Lumiere.
Yes.
You remember Lumiere? They just put their camera here, shot a dog running, a wall falling, a mother and father feeding a child, and that's it. He is in that tradition. So if Lumiere was the father of the documentary, all right, how do we figure Viernes in relation to you're most welcome. Take a seat. All right. Thank you for coming. All right. The role that he did doing documents, he needs to be seen in that status, in that position. And as I said, he's foundational. What will be his role into that within the documentary tradition? But in itself, the whole movie, in fact, Viernes now with his films, he has just exalted the whole movie into that high level, because Lumiere too did whole movies. He was being shot feeding his own child. Larry Paddy Bebe feeding a child. That was him. That was Lumiere, the cameraman himself, now being shot by somebody else. Okay, so still back to that. If we now start studying, deconstructing the film, these issues now come into play. One, the gaze. And please spell gaze. G-A-Z-E, all right? Don't get me wrong. Just because I started it off with the gay gaze. But now this is the camera gaze, all right? So I'm not confusing the two, please. All right? So who's looking at what? And why is he? It should be a he. I don't think, I'm sorry, but I'm sure, I do not think a woman, a female shot it. Most possibly, as we said, the big mystery that we need to uncover, it could be the brother who played the yo-yo. All right, why not? Why not? I mean, the dexterity of the hand, all right? But now we start studying, the camera was moving. Wow, at that early stage, movement of the camera was phenomenal. I mean, it was sensational in the same way 3D effects right now, makes us so gushy, when we watch it on the screen. During the time, for any camera to move, it dislodges our perspective, our sense of stability as a viewer. Now suddenly it's moving, and that was sensational. That has to be studied. The semiotics of it. I mean, if you want to treat it in a funny way, that I was able to read that man rubbing somebody else's back. I was able to read it semiotically. What are the things that we're going to talk about? The representation of women. At what position in the screen do we see women? How often do we see women statistically? All of these things can matter so much. And as I said, I'm just talking about the documentary itself, not only now of its history, but also of its aesthetics, of its poetics, and maybe of its economics. I want to know exactly who was funding this film. Clear. He was working for
General Motors.
General Motors. Wow, you're like working now for Musk. Just imagine that working. So he had money and he had access to equipment. What was the equipment he used? Bell and Howell, top of the line, baby. That was top of the line. Kodak. He used Kodak, of course, the most dominant at the time. Kodak was used. Kodachrome, the latest to be introduced in the market. Oh my God, he was having the best. How could he afford that? And the important thing is, and this is where we need to appreciate Viernes, for whom? For whom was he making this film? Obsessively. 300 titles, that secures his position in the highest echelon of documentary filmmaking. And mind you, each reel, as I was told, each reel is of a different subject matter. Maybe it's a repetition, but it's not the very fact that they were not edited together. So you have here one essential subject followed by another. He almost therefore shot 300 subjects within his lifetimes, and some have been lost in the flood or God knows what. But well preserved, for us who value good image, that was well preserved. And love you, ma'am. Love you. Thank you. Salamat po. I'm sorry, we'll extend a little bit. I just wanted to respond, but I'm as you can see, my enthusiasm is just beyond the roof. This is amazing. This is just amazing. And I hope, I've been told I'm very infectious. I hope not with my cough, but with my enthusiasm, because I'm investing on the young people here who one day will have to be, scholars, and you need to follow through. And we have here a very fresh topic that can yield so much knowledge ahead of us. But let me just round it up, because a conversation has to happen. So we did the history of the documentary. There's the aesthetics, as I said, the poetics, what else? The economics, the technology, the ideology. So we are talking now of the medium of cinema. Okay? The first one was more of the narrative. A narrative that can find its expression either in words or in technology, which is cinema. And I just want to bring here as an added issue, around this time, somebody was expressing his identity in the graphic visual arts. Can anybody guess? Please, Ma'am Boots, I know you know. Can anybody who knows his art history or her art history or their art history? Around this time, somewhere in Washington State.
You made a film about him.
I did a film about him. There's a clue. Somebody else pick it up. I made a film about him. He's a national artist. Bang!
You said it.
The Edades, exactly. Victorio Edades, who was also a victim of miscegenation. He married Jean Edades, 1928, if I'm not mistaken. Then immediately left Washington the next day after their marriage in order to avoid exactly getting incarcerated, because he married a white woman. And then they left immediately for the Philippines. Around this time, he was expressing Filipino-ness. While being in America, through his paintings. So may tatlo na tayong napakahalagang triangle, no? Different media, unbelievable. Somebody should write about this. Filipinos outside of their territory, so-called national territory, and exploring identity outside, or even finding their identity outside, and see how media were implicated. There's painting or visual arts, there's motion pictures, and there's literature. This is interesting. I don't know. What about music? Maybe we don't know much. Dance? We never know. I will end this by talking about the third significance of today's presentation. And I'm talking about documentary heritage. Documentary heritage. What is documentary heritage? Today's presentation, the discovery of Viernes' films, the work that Ashley and her team, and what she claimed as community archiving, all of this efforts are out to preserve our documentary heritage. Documentary heritage tries to safeguard the document. Let me define the document according to UNESCO. UNESCO says that a documentary is anything that is produced with intellectual intent. Anything that is made with intellectual intent. So, writings, books, photographs, motion pictures, recorded sound, the 4-day broadcast of the EDSA revolution, those are documents. I say this not so much to campaign for the committee that I head in UNESCO. I'm the chairman of the UNESCO Philippines Memory of the World Committee. We recognize our outstanding documents in this country. Why? As the title or the name of my committee suggests, these are memories of the world. We can all vanish, but our memories must remain. And I think this will answer the question that I said. Why did Viernes shoot obsessively these films? For what reason? The documentary heritage is a spirit that passes on from generation to generation. Why did Estrella, preserve these films in her house, all right, complete with all those ephemera? Because she was concerned about preserving and passing on the documentary heritage. So we need to be passionate about the documentary. Why is Ashley preserving all of these motion pictures? For what reason? What did she find? And in our conversation, that's what I would like her to respond to. I mean, why? I could see the insistence she had with Ma'am Boots here that, she need to have this mounted. And Ma'am Boots was saying, I'm sorry, I'm fully booked till 2030. All right? And so, but she was accommodating. And thank you, Ma'am Boots, and thank you for Ateneo to really host this, because I feel that, we have somehow shared this, not only obsession, but our task. Documentary heritage is our collective task. We need to preserve documents of who we are so that we will know where we may be going. And with that, maybe we can start our conversation.
Anyone from the audience?
Huwag na kayong mag-iya.
Wala. Parang stop.
I'm sure may tanong kayo. Yeah, there are two.
Ayun na, Nick Deocampo. There's your favorite.
Oh, the favorites.
We actually of the paintings of Soroya. Diba?
She has 2 essays, and really wonderfully written. She compares the Surah to the pointillism of Surah. Surah. Yeah, the post-impressionist Surah. Very. Oh. All right. Yeah, there's a question. Loud, please.
Hi,
Identify yourself.
hi, good afternoon. This is a working on this project, my voice.
Sure.
My name is Alita Moberg, and I am a psychology major. Thank you so much, Nick and Ashley, for coming here to Ateneo. I really enjoyed the talk this afternoon. So, coming from someone who is in psychology, medyo outsider ako when it comes to film. I don't really have that intricate understanding of the things that happen before we see it on the screen. So I was wondering, especially when it comes to analyzing or viewing films from the past, like Nick's over here, like Viernes' film over here, how can we analyze it in a way that could perhaps introduce an interdisciplinary perspective so that we could perhaps glean new insights? As Sir Nick has mentioned earlier, it is important to integrate different lenses to gain new perspectives. So I was just wondering how I could do that from someone from a different field.
May I immediately jump into this? Film is interdisciplinary. We need to start it here and now. All right? It's been so long that film has been hijacked, first of all, by literature. And this is where my new book and where my advocacy comes in right now, that we need to emancipate cinema from the literary mooring that Hollywood instigated, incorporated to us because we were a colony of America. In other words, America had to sell their films, and they did that by having the films to tell stories. It's easy to really sell commodities with that common understanding of what it is. So they made us all feel the same love as the Americans love. So we feel like Clark Gable loving, all of this. So we patterned a lot of those things. Look at our films right now. I mean, there's all Hollywood derived. So that's one. But as I said, it became dominant. It became hegemonic.
Yes.
What we need to consider now is you're confronted by a narrative-less set of motion pictures. How will you react to this? So this is a great beginning for all of us. Now you can position yourself as a subject, trying to look at what you see on the screen with your personal response for somebody who comes from psychology. There's a lot of questions you can already raise, as in, what's going on in the mind of Viernes while he's shooting this? How did he feel? When he did the following shots, for example. So now you can, as I said, interpolate visually. In other words, you can interpret it the way you do. And one classic example is me interjecting my gender identity just to set off the dam that you're free. So your psychology. May I know who else is so passionate about from which sector you're coming from? Yes, you. You're laughing, you're smiling, and it's a very knowing smile.
Fine arts.
Fine arts. What were you interested? What were you looking at? So here, related to fine arts, somebody, Ma'am Boots already, with her knowledge of fine arts and all that, saw Surah. Actually interpreted that scene from like Surah. So fine arts, your interest, your knowledge can enter that, can interpret some of those scenes. Yes, you. Yeah, I can see your body language.
I'm from interdisciplinary studies.
All right,
from FE.
Wilder. So
Yes.
where? How did you react?
The way I see the first project or the scene or the I don't know,
go ahead.
video, I already saw lots of themes, especially in terms of
Typical of
diaspora,
somebody who's interdisciplinary. Multiple.
like diaspora,
There
the
you go.
history of him, why he's in
There you go.
America, then the social class struggles there, what are the
Enough. We will never end because I know interdisciplinary can take
Yes.
over everything. Yeah,
Exactly.
we'll get into you, ma'am, in a little while. Thank you. And so let's finish off this whole question right now before Ashley will also answer you. That your question again is how
Can someone from a different field integrate their experiences into analyzing of this?
easy. Just integrate it. Respond. It starts with what's your response? Not all of those pre-conditioned responses that one, our school is telling us. You know, they just smothered your instinctual, personal response. So you come from psychology, let go. Know exactly, ask your questions. So these are the methodologies. First of all, respond. This is how I feel. Don't even think that, oh my God, Nick Deocampo is here, he's going to tell me it's wrong. No! I advocate emancipative responses. Respond the way you do. Just like in my classes, I do not shoot down any of my students and say, you're wrong. No. You never know, he's coming from another angle that I do not know. That was not in my sphere of experience. So I want to listen to you. As long as a student, or you can argue that, I really thought that was a gay sensibility in that particular scene, then argue, because if anybody's going to challenge me why I could read gay sensibility in that scene, you wait until outside. Because I will argue exactly, why I feel that way, why psychologically I responded that way. All right, so respond, ask questions, and of course try to answer for yourself, but validate it with what you see, because the danger is overreading. Okay, there's a danger, but overreading for me is just reading. It's not informed enough. So your background of psychology should already assure you that you're grounded somewhere. Just find your courage to say what you think. And as I said, everything becomes argument after this. So
I would say maybe leaning more into an intuitive and creative or artistic interpretation. I think sciences, they have really hard limitations. Clinical, it's really clinical assignment towards how you're supposed to interpret things. It's very methodological. And just in the way that I've learned to approach this work, and I'm still learning, is to really trust your own voice and to listen to yourself along the way. One thing that came up for me is the intention of the gaze in itself. You were mentioning like Western dominant hegemonizing frameworks in the images, earlier on that Nicholas Viernes was working against. His intention was out of love and care, and he really, wanted to make all of this possible for future generations too. So the work that he was doing at the time, it was to record history as it was passing, as it was a present for him for the future. The work that we're doing now is looking at this history, reshaping it, recontextualizing it, sharing it to create presence and futures forward as well. Like Nick Deocampo said, this is just the beginning. This is just a threshold. This is the first time we're sharing this at Ateneo. It's only been 3 years. We haven't even, really put it out there yet. It will be through a book, through documentary. When we present this at the MoMA at the end of this month, it'll be installed into the American cinema canon. At that stage and at that level, but there's just so much more ahead, and I'm really inviting all of you to be a part of it. I can't get into like how traumatic this experience has been, honestly. On the way up, you have to be crazy to jump into an archive. There's been so many challenges. We don't have a permanent home. We don't have a permanent vault space right now, but that's not going to stop it from getting the care that it deserves. So it's just an ongoing conversation.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Ashley and Nick.
Thank you very much. Very exciting and interesting conversations back and forth. I'm Pat Dakudao. I'm from the History Department. And just a historian's curiosity, did Uncle Nick Viernes leave any letters or diaries? And just looking at the images, and yes, Surah, did he go to the Chicago Art Institute. Even the lilies there reflect some of these paintings shown, but I don't know when they acquired those paintings. So just some of these questions, but very interesting. You might tell me more about
Yeah,
it.
there's a lot of really adjacent ephemera that Australia kept. We have images of him on his deathbed. We have a VHS tape of his funeral. So really fittingly, poetically, the first VHS tape that we scanned with media burn was of his funeral early last year. So it's just, you know, this incredible rich legacy of 60 millimeter film, and then we moved to the other format, it's his funeral on VHS. There are letters from his brother, from family members. His brother Albert, the yo-yo champion, wrote a letter from World War II. He was he was serving for the U.S. military, and they were addressed to Nick Viernes as well. So there's so much of the archive that I personally cannot get to because I'm backlogged with these films, but we really need a whole team and army.
I support that, and I'm glad a historian or somebody who teaches history is here, because as you know, I've written 20 film books and they're all on history, and therefore we can talk about methodology. And you asked a very good question, because what we have here is a set of documents. They cannot really speak for themselves, although they talk. Semiotically, we can read, but it can be read. Now here's the danger, it's vulnerable to the reception of any viewer or anybody who assesses that film. We can read into it. And therefore, if we need to find the integrity of the original author, then we need to look, and that's exactly what I'm asking Ashley, what are the other, she calls it ephemera, but other supporting documents? I just heard her say that there was a biography. Is there? Did you mention that he wrote that there's a biography somewhere? I heard it, but I would be interested, you know, how else, you know, we could possibly track down, you know, the things that we can extract as historical against the cinematic. Because what we experience right now is the cinematic, and there's a lot to talk about. That is issue number 2 that I said, what is a documentary? But our interest here now is what is history? And is cinema already equivalent to history just because we were able to capture actual people in actual time, in actual events? There's more that needs to be talked about. And therefore, while I was talking to Ashley, and she answered this very well, when I just listened to her while she was sort of preparing for her talk here, I said, I can poke, as a historian, I can poke holes into what she was trying to present. But then suddenly she gave me 2 essays that she just sent a night or 2 nights ago, and then suddenly she answered almost everything that I wanted to know. 1, there's a history of technology that needs to be explained here. How is this shot made accessible? It could only be made accessible with an amateur lightweight camera. There is technology to the aesthetics and therefore to the ideology of the image that we see. Can you see how complicated it is? And for a historian, that's our job to explain that. It starts with technology because cinema is always and will forever be technology. It is. That's why I made a difference between literature, which is in written words, or painting in graphic images. It has its own unique history, and it starts with the technology. And then it moves on to what has been captured, and therefore we interpret it until we end up with what's the ideology of this image that we watch. So there you go. There's a lot to talk about just on the historical level alone.
I just want to add to this a little bit. When I met with Nick yesterday, we were talking about technology and trying to find, he was poking holes in this research, and he said, we need to look at the consumer history of 16mm film. So we looked even earlier and we saw that Brownie cameras had become popular during the Filipino American War. There were a lot of soldiers who had come here to the Philippines and were photographing their exploits while enlisted. They were photographing dead bodies. This is this notion of objection, of creating the other, creating fear, and those became stereographs. And those stereographs and other popular imagery, you know, those are all within this lineage too. And this is what is being disrupted through the preservation and ongoing conversations. It's all in process.
So when you watch just a photograph, I want to go to this, how important interdisciplinary studies can be. You know, we're serious and we know it needs to be in our minds as well that it suddenly triggers all its other connections. So we need to go into readings that bring us far beyond cinema and even far beyond history alone. So these comparative readings in visual arts, in so many other ways. You know.
Dialectical. Dialectical.
That's exactly what I wanted to talk about. Because I read it on the second page of this wonderful essay that Ashley has written. She introduced the idea of dialectical framework, which she defined as it is a technique where a historical image or object from the past is brought together with the present in a sudden, and I quote, constellated flash of insight. She's quoting somebody else here, I'm sure.
Walter Benjamin.
Oh, this is Walter Benjamin.
Walter Benjamin's
really?
dialectical image.
Wow. The dialectical image, but you have this as a framework. So, in other words, we are confronting. Remember that when I screamed, oh my God, that's so eerie. Those people waving at us, didn't you feel eerie about it? That you said, oh, it's so ghost-like, all right? That alone can be a chapter to talk about in terms of this dialectical confrontation. An image from the past looking at us in the present. Does that mean anything at all? You know, who's looking at who? Do you really think, do you really impute that those were dead? But they're alive as well, looking at us. And are you sure we will be here forever? We can be dead too. And so, it's very rich in terms of this dialectical back and forth, you know, discussion, in fact, of the gazes. Because we are gazing at them, but the very fact that these people who are now all dead, you know, are gazing into the camera, and when they gaze straight at the camera, they're gazing at the audiences. So the complexity of gazes here, the psychology, psychoanalysis, all of this are all, you know, caught up in particular images like this. Maybe you can move on. So sorry, but you're all still here. If you want to live, you can. You know, at your own detriment, all right? That's another question. But those who want to live, you can go.
Hello, I'm Nicoy, also from AB Interdisciplinary Studies, but I'm also taking a minor in Panitikang Filipino. I'd like to ask if there is also one like Nievres, but in the Philippine context instead. So, a Filipino documentarian during the early colonial period. That we could perhaps compare and contrast how Nievres and this Filipino documentarian in the Philippines would have presented and used the camera to depict life during those times.
Immediate answer, no. That's why your experience here is so precious. No. I'm a historian of Filipino cinema. I rummaged through and I went beyond the commercial movie industry. The closest we can have, and he's the pioneer of Philippine cinema, the closest we can have is the father of Philippine cinema, Jose Nepomuceno, who started as a documentary filmmaker by doing a newsreel, his first film, earlier than Dalagang Bukid, which everybody knows is the first Filipino film, and I debunk it by saying that Nepomuceno made his first film not in Manila but in Cebu, and that was a newsreel on the funeral of the wife of the Vice President Sergio Osmeña. How did I find this out? In La Nueva Fuerza, a Spanish newspaper, wherein there was an account that in 3 movie houses there was this film that was shown, and those advertisements were saying, come to these 3 movie theaters because you might see yourself. So who's crazy enough? And you see yourself. In other words, it was shot right there and then, and it captured people passing through the coffin. Of course, the film was lost, like all of the films by Nepomuceno. So having said that, my immediate answer to you is no. Now, the historian will have to ask these very good questions. Why is it that there was none in the Philippines? And you just provoked me with that question. All right, by saying exactly one, back to political economy, because that's the thing that makes possible films as capitalistic as a motion picture. We are not talking of pen and paper anymore. We are not talking of easel and brush and a canvas. We are talking about a technology where you have to buy it. I don't think it was given to him by General Motors.
It's a boutique medium.
It is a boutique medium. In other words, those who can afford. Now, you have any equipment. Do you think it can just generate images? No. You have to buy that newly released Kodachrome. He used Kodachrome. He could have used Ektachrome. Hey, I know the technology, the history of these technologies. Kodachrome was the most sought after. When I was doing my Super 8, trying to cover the EDSA revolution, that's why I identify, he's my father or he's my grandfather. Because I'm a home movie maker and I have been fighting for 40 years. Please recognize the home movie because that was my genre. I make films about my lost father when he was still alive. The EDSA revolution, the damning documents during the martial law era. So I identify with it. The big difference between us is I politicized the amateur home movie while he personalized it. It's a good step. But those who are children of those very innocent and blessed fathers were always the radicals, all right? So we changed it. So the point I answer you is, there was Nepomuceno. He started as a documentary filmmaker, but the culture of commercialism and capitalism, which engulfed the production of movies in this country, brought by Hollywood because of the capitalist philosophy, escapist ideology, he had to fight his way in the market. He cannot sustain his newsreel filmmaking, of which he was already the best. He was being commissioned by Congress, the US Congress, to make newsreels about the 7 leading industries in the country, such as copra making, did Filipinos want to watch copra making, hemp making? I mean, come on. Nobody wanted that. Our capitalist desire wanted us to see 2 lovers kissing on the screen. There you go. So he stopped doing his very promising newsreel. He was already on the verge of becoming a Nicolas Viernes, and earlier than Nicolas, because he started in 1918. Then he stopped by 1923, picked up by Viernes. Now, oh my God, now I'm reconstructing Filipino newsreel history, which is I love. I love the question. So, the political economy, how can you produce a technological art like this? That should answer your question, why there was no Nicolas Viernes here, and why this is such a precious, precious encounter with history right now, because something lacking in this country, suddenly we find it somewhere else.
I think to that, I just want to refer to the conversation that we had in December when I first came to the Philippines, and we were talking about the Duwata film that you recovered, and how it is just kind of an ethnographic portrayal. It's a fictional ethnographic film. And you're speculating that it's by the father of Filipino cinema. It's not guaranteed yet, but you have a lot of clues. And we also have to look at that framework. What Viernes was doing versus the market-driven ethnography, that he was pressured into making too. Just how the people on screen are portrayed and the intention behind that.
Okay, for the last, because I know we're sensitive sa time ninyo, although this conversation is just wonderful. How many more questions are going to be? So we can manage our time. There's one there. There's a second. There's one. All right. Salamat po sa pagpunta.
Thank you.
All right. Salamat. Only one? Ah, okay.
There's
Is there anybody here?
May isa pa.
May isa pa. So we can manage our time. All right, proceed.
Hi po, my name is Margot. I think what really struck me was you interjecting during the beach scene when you were like, "Oh, it's a gay read."
Those nails.
Yes,
my
ma'am.
Okay.
And considering that this is kind of the place where probably a lot of the study is going to come from, as like the setting, looking into the archives, but also into the filmmaker himself. When I heard it, I kind of looked at what was being shown on the screen, and the thing that got into my head was, is he gay? Mismo. And like, I know a lot of, especially historically, like reading things as queer is about reading in between the lines. And the more I looked at it, and I was like, yeah, it is a tender, it's a gay scene. But I was like, is the filmmaker himself, could he be queer? Kasi you're on a beach, and there's all of these people in like scantily clad swimsuits, and you're filming two guys rubbing like one back, and he's musculado, and he's everything. And then I remembered how you described him, he was never married. And then he was this eccentric, like dandy type of character.
Yeah.
He dressed very like lavishly. And so like never married, dressed really lavishly. And in the beach, he decides not to zoom in and have a close-up of a woman in the water. Instead, he like zooms in one of the few scenes that we see, zooms in on two guys rubbing sunscreen on each other. And I don't know if this is particularly going to be like a major thing, but I think it is room for inquiry. Because at that point, it's like, dandy, never married, lived with the brother the whole time. If it quacks like a duck, and it walks like a duck, maybe there's room for...
Speculated right away, but you know, and as Nick's reaction, that's just creating more discourse. It's just continuing the worlding that's ongoing right now in this conversation. But I do think that we need to be very responsible and nuanced about how we approached it as well, because his family is still around. We don't know how they might feel, how they experienced, you know, this entire thing, all of this history too. So it's just we can make, you know, our reads. We definitely have the license to do that, but it comes with like an ethical responsibility too.
I support that, all right? And let me just push this a little bit. Even in very male films or genres like cowboy, presenting itself as a macho imagery, for example, one can do a gay reading, just to let you know, without necessarily imputing that the director is gay. So doing that immediate transfer may be dangerous and may not be very responsible. But it is possible. Like so many in queer studies, so many papers have been written about reading queerness in those cowboy movies done in way back when. All right. Having said that, now you mentioned it yourself, because the point you was raising was there can be a line of inquiry that can be made. Nobody can stop you from that, but the appeal is, you know, be ethical, be responsible, and in my case, validate it with the imagery. As I said earlier, with the psychology issue that was raised, is that can you validate it? You know, can you find your evidences, which can be textual, which can be circumstantial. Like, for example, imputing that he's gay because he did not marry, you know, is, you know, may not really work. But there's still a lot of mystery in this film, and who knows? You know, if this will be made available publicly, then that can be a line of inquiry that you may possibly have. Maybe you can have the last question.
I'm Vincent Tualo, graduate of Foreign Service at New York University, and also a former graduate student at PH Center. So my question is, I have two questions actually. The first question is, how did Nick Viernes films shape the perspectives of living conditions of the Filipino diaspora in the U.S. during pre-war era, especially on the interracial marriages of the Filipinos? And the second is, did Nick Viernes films about Filipino diaspora in the U.S. influence the past and present of Philippine-U.S. relations, and how will it shape its future?
I think it's a very fraught time in America right now. I'm not going to go too much into that, but memory is really at stake. And that's what makes this collection all the more vital, because it is just giving evidence that America was never how the dominant powers at hand wants it to be presented as, too. I have friends working in the Smithsonian, and they share horror stories with me about what is going on right now within the archives, too. So pushing this forward as much as possible, just being testimony to record is so much more important now more than ever. The authenticity of memory and the integrity of memory, we all have to stand by it, we all have to witness it, and we all need to advocate for it. That's what the work we're doing now is. I can't speak too much about how it's influencing to this day, because it's still unfolding. But I really believe in the collective effort, especially in this platform today. The energy in this room has been incredible. Thank you all so much.
If you're talking about the impact that it made in the contemporaneous society during the time, then I don't think there ever was, except for the most immediate family or network of kins that he may have possibly had. Because there's a question of circulation. In film, that's a very important topic. Circulation. In other words, how did the film circulate? Consider it was a home movie. A lot of things were working against it. There would not have been a movie theater that he can go to and project it publicly, and even charge money if he did. All right, so that immediately would answer your question that, would it have impacted on that? So anybody who's going to research on this, then you really have to, confront that issue of circulation. How did this piece of commodity, entertaining as it was, how did it go around? I really felt, and maybe this is part of, my conclusion now, that Viernes, as the artist that we need to consider him to be right now, was really looking at the future. And that's why I found that image. If I were to come out here and remember one scene, it's not going to be that man, hey, maybe it's not that man robbing, somebody else's back. It is really, I'm going to be haunted by those women and that framed image, of people just waving. For whom? To whom? There was only the camera that they were interacting with. How did they look at the camera? Who did they see in that camera? Did they see? I would like to suggest they saw the future. They saw people who are not there. In fact, they were looking at ghosts as we are looking at them as ghosts. O, di ba? Napaka-poetic ng ating ano. What a way to conclude, di ba? Ang ganda. Alright. We concluded really by saying that, what is cinema all about? And what is the cinema of Nicolas Viernes? It is a cinema of memory. A cinema of remembrance. And a cinema of document. I'm just, and let me reflect at what we're doing right now. We love shooting our Shih Tzu. We love shooting the daffodils and God knows what else. For whom are you making those? So I go back to the importance of Viernes's films as documentary heritage. Because, as I said, if a document is defined as anything made with intellectual intent, there's a lot of intellectuality that went into the making of these images. They were not haphazard. He had to set it up, and Ashley was asking a very good question. Oh, did they have light meter during the time? Because unlike our cameras right now, they're automatic. You don't have to be a genius in order to shoot a film now. That one, you have to be precise with the distance, because just a fraction there of in the distance, and then suddenly you'll be out of focus, as what happened in some of the scenes. But in general, 98%, it's a jaw-dropping, so clear, so focused, so intentionally shot, and yet so randomly acted out. In fact, there was stiffness there because they thought it was a still camera. Yeah, there was a body language wherein they need to pose when it was a moving camera. There's a discrepancy there. All right. So we just, if the way I'm going to end my presentation right now is one, Ashley, you brought dialectical framework. You know, you made it alive with the experience we had today, and that dialectic, you know, between the past and the present, the image and the performance, various media and all that. You brought that all into this discussion, and we thank you for that. And we thank you for coming and really staying. I'm amazed. All right, and this has been a rich discussion. Thank you for your questions. I'm sure there were other responded questions, so you just bring it home, and that will be your task, you know, to find the meanings. Whether Nicholas Viernes is gay or not. Okay, thank you.
I just want to thank Boots, Nick, thank you so much, Ateneo. Thank you so much for all of the support and bringing this together. This is not by any means the conclusion because we have a lot of work to do. I hope this inspires you all to think more about this and about how it can affect your work, how you're also charged with shaping it in the future. Please come see me. I have business cards and I need a lot of help. So thank you all so much.
Thank you again. I forgot to mention, this is actually the first of a series of programs that we've confirmed related to the moving image. Our next event actually will happen outdoors. Some of you probably have seen this. Kiri Delena and Ben Briggs is Walang Masusulingan. And we're showing it in outdoors in a makeshift two-channel video screening. That's February. And then March, we have Kono Basho. We're screening it. The director has actually offered to actually screen it with us. So there you go. We hope to have more in the future. So, and this is a good way to start this series. So thank you, Ashley, and thank you, Nick. And happy